Now, why do I call myself a libertarian socialist as opposed to, say, a democratic socialist, which the term Bernie Sanders uses, and a lot of other people now have picked up to express their position on politics and the direction the country should be going in? Well, the main reason is I think the term libertarian socialism better conveys where I actually stand. And I think that's not only because what the words mean in their historical context, but what they mean to people today. When Chomsky said that there was a split in the early socialist movement, he was talking about a split between anarchist socialists and democratic socialists. And the leading proponents of each view were, on the anarchist side, Mikhail Bakunin, this is toward the end of the 1800s, and on the other side for democratic socialism, it was Karl Marx, believe it or not. He was a democratic socialist. And the main issue between them was one of strategy. Both sides wanted to get to some future socialist or communist society in which everybody would have all they need, and you wouldn't need a government to coerce people to do things, because people would be able to work together voluntarily and consensually. But the question was, how do we get from here to there? The democratic socialists, as I explained in my last episode, wanted to form workers' political parties, contest in elections and gain office, and then finally hold power in the government to start instituting reforms and then move toward a more socialist society. The anarchist socialists saw this as problematic because traditionally anarchism, which has a longer history than modern socialism, much longer, has seen the state itself as an institution created to keep a ruling class in power over the workers of a society. And Bakunin predicted that if democratic socialists were successful in gaining government power, they would just institute a new ruling class composed of intellectuals and bureaucrats. Now, it looks pretty far-sighted when you see what happened in the Soviet Union, but this is 50 years before that, so he was talking about people who regarded themselves as democratic socialists, really wanted to use democratic politics, not violent revolution, which is what people associate with the Russian Revolution. Most people were actually, though, somewhere in the middle. They lean one way or the other, and that's true of me as well. I see some role for electoral politics in a strategy, but I also have concerns about that. And I share with anarchists the view that direct action is a good strategy, that you can take actions like demonstrations, strikes, and then going a little bit further, maybe further than I'm willing to go at the present, is takeover of factories and even the use of destruction of property or violence to institute a anarchist socialist society. So I have some reservations about each side, but I see some value in each side. If I'm going to be in the middle like that, why don't I just call myself a socialist and have done with it? Don't use any adjectives to modify that. Well, the main reason is what that word means today. And to most people in the United States, in particular, it means big government and the restrictions of individual freedoms. They fear that what democratic socialists are trying to do, and conservatives have enthusiastically promoted this view over a course of over a century, is what they really want to do is use democratic politics to gain power and then institute something like Stalinist Russia, where you take away political rights and some people rule over others. A big government rules over everybody else, like George Orwell's 1984. That's I think a little far-fetched concern about democratic socialists. I think what Bernie is trying to do is use that modifier democratic to insist that these are also proponents of democratic rights and civil rights as well, pointing towards European societies rather than communist societies, to say, look, this is what happened in Europe. They were able to gain political power. They shared it with other parties. They had free elections. They were able to institute a lot of socialist measures, even to the point of nationalizing key industries in some countries. So they're trying to point toward a different model, but I think that's often lost on Americans because they don't know much about Western European countries. They tend to think this is really a movement in the direction of something like the Soviet Union, whatever Bernie might say, or even whatever Bernie might think or hope. So I see that the term democratic socialism is not quite adequate to convey what I would like to convey. Anarchism is also a problematic term to people. Well, it literally means no rulers, but to most people it means, well, if you don't have rulers, it means you just want chaos. Everybody does whatever they want, even at the expense of other people. So they associate it with disorder, chaos, violence, all that kind of bad stuff. This is not what most anarchists have in mind. They really are looking for a society in which people can gradually learn how to work together harmoniously and cooperatively, but they recognize that in the interim, there's going to be a need for government and reducing the size of government. Getting a little off track here. What I want to say is anarchism is not as good a term either, so I use the term libertarian socialism, which, as Ruth Kinna said, in Europe is synonymous with anarchist socialism. But to me, in the United States, it sounds different because it sounds closer to the libertarians that we're familiar with, who want minimal government, not no government, and who also want to minimize coercion. And that's pretty much where I find myself. The big difference, of course, is that libertarians in the United States are proponents of capitalism and libertarian socialists are not. This happened because libertarian socialism was, first of all, used for anarchism in France a long time ago, over 100 years ago, because France had outlawed anarchists, so people who were proponents of anarchist socialism used a different term, libertarian, derived from liberty, free society, free individuals within society. This is what they were promoting. It caught on and it was used for a long time, synonymous with anarchist socialism, but then in the United States, mid-20th century, proponents of fundamentalist free market ideology, conservatives essentially, picked up the term and stole it from the anarchists to use it for their own purposes. So I want to make that distinction, but what I do find useful about it is, number one, that it conveys minimal government, minimal coercion, not simply absence of government, and also because it causes some disharmony in people's thoughts. Well, how can you put those two things together? Libertarianism and socialism forces people to rethink what each of those terms really means. Libertarian socialism should be more associated with freedom, and socialism should also be associated with freedom. So that's why I prefer the term libertarian socialism to either democratic socialism or anarchist socialism. I think it both forces people to think a little bit about what each of those terms means, has meant, should mean, and also pretty accurately conveys what I want, which is minimal government, minimal coercion, and a society in which people's needs are met and people have power over their own lives.